move towards reinforcing their decisions. And if they reinforce them often enough, of course, then they become attitudes, stored up decisions, you see, and then we're pretty safe because they don't have to make that decision again. But as they move toward it, there's a different set of factors that become persuasive. Persuaders in the second level to validate the original decision. We call them validators. And you won't believe this, but one of the best is facts and data. Once we've touched their motivations or made an association or showed them that it's socially rewarding to do this, of course, people immediately, being humans, hear that, start accepting it, and then switch to skepticism. Well, now wait a minute, I got to look at the other side of this. When they start doing that, we need to validate that, yeah, what you were thinking originally is right. And at that point, that's the one place in this whole process where being able to rip off the data helps. Because what people are really looking for in validators is excuses to go along with the decision they've already made. Now, there are some other validators. One of them is calling on authority. People in positions of authority, or the Constitution. You know, how often do you hear that? It's un-American, it's unconstitutional. That's to call on existing authorities. It works. Ronnie Reagan fights a little mini war down in Grenada. Doesn't let the media or anybody else in on it. People are kind of upset about this. That's not the way we usually do business in America. And so he starts taking the heat. So what does he do? He appoints a commission of 20 prominent Americans, authority, and he says, you take a look at this and see if I acted properly. So they take about 6 months while all of us forget about Grenada. And then they come back with their report, which says Ronnie did the right thing. Okay, now if you want to criticize Ronnie, you have to criticize 20 authority figures. And most of us just say, forget it. Let's go get a beer. I don't want to do that. Okay? That's the power of authority. But, and here's the big mistake. A lot of people don't know the difference between these original persuasion methods and validation methods, and so they start with the validators. How often do we say that? Well, the governor says, everybody says, who gives a damn? You see? Because when the validators come first, we tend to say, wait a minute, we're independent Americans, out. But when they come second, we accept them. History, wonderful. I remember back in '02, all you lobbyists will love this. I remember back in the session of '64. Remember old Senator Smith? And somehow that makes it okay. Precedent. In other words, we've done it before. It's not a new idea. Everybody's scared of new ideas. But if it was brought up in '02, it's perfectly okay. Tradition is another one. Not only was it brought up once before, but we've always done it that way. Now, what would happen if your lead-off was to say, well, we've always done it this way because? People would immediately say, that's the best reason to get rid of it. We've always done it that way, get rid of it. But once we've appealed to their motivation or social rewards and punishment, and they've bought that, then if we say, and besides, we've always done it that way, it's perfectly safe, then they say, yeah, that's right, by golly, we've always done it that way. So it's important to know the difference between the original persuader and the validators. A couple more points. Should we tell just our side of the story, or is it sometimes smart to tell both sides? And there's a good rule on that. If you're fairly certain that the people sooner or later will hear the other side, it's best to tell the other side yourself. Because here's what happens. We come out and we say, now look, we'd like to get economic freedom and be deregulated. And we understand this is a break with the way things have been done. And we've made a big analysis of this because obviously we're part of the state and we want it to be best for the state as well as best for us. And here's the way we see it. Here's the pros and here's the cons. And so from this we've concluded, and we hope you'll conclude with us, that we ought to do it because the pros are much stronger. Now what happens when you do that? Well, here's what happens. The opposition jumps up and says, wait a minute, and they start listing off the cons, and everybody says, yawn, I already heard those. They already told me the cons. And the sense of honesty that comes with that, the trustworthiness, they were straight enough with me to tell the bad points as well as the good points. So if the other side is apt to get some blows in. Now, on the other hand, the campaign is in full blast, and you're speaking to the Rotary Club, and there's no speaker from the other side. It's not a debate. Should you make their points? Forget it. Forget it. Because people aren't immediately going to hear their points. So you go in and you just sock home your points. Boom, 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 boom. All the difference in whether you give both sides or just give your own side. A couple of other things may be of some interest to you. The best studies that we have tell us that humor is probably the most powerful persuasive tool there is. However, I don't think any of us needs to be told that it is also by far the toughest. It's by far the toughest. So if you're a person that just has a natural good sense of humor and can make a joke around your subject, maybe even a joke on you or the company or dereg, the disarming effect of that in persuasive terms is just wonderful. Because, you know, if we can joke about something, clearly we're not hung up on it. And if we're not hung up on it, that means we're not zealots about it. It means our backs aren't to the wall. And that just disarms people. People say, well, by gosh, you know, it must be okay. These self-deprecating jokes. Think of the good politicians. You know, they're always able to get up there and say, remember that crazy bill I introduced last year? Let me tell you how I got talked into that. And then they give you these wonderful stories, which make them look like asses. But you love them for it. Because people who can't do that aren't real people. They haven't really got a rounded personality. One of the things that I can't leave the subject without mentioning is, of course, eye contact. I keep looking around at all of you because I want to make sure you and I are having a dialogue here and that I'm not just up here reading some stupid speech, because I need to know where you're coming from. And, you know, if I get to the point where you're all sitting there saying, for God's sake, Jackson, go on to the next point, usually I'm smart enough to go on to the next point. But see, if I'm not making that eye contact, I have no way of knowing that. So if we want to be persuasive, we need to make eye contact both to interpret what's coming back, but also the boldness, the forthrightness, the frankness, the honesty of looking people right in the eye is more persuasive probably than any words that can come out of our mouth. And if you think about it, those people who are good persuaders usually can look you right in the eye.
One of the things that we're going to do in the next hour is talk about how you put people in a box and put a label on their forehead. Now, I'm sure that over the last 10 or 15 years you have heard over and over and over again that the one thing you don't do is put people in a box and stereotype them and stick a label on their forehead and then treat them that way. But in fact, there is a very reliable way of doing that. And so that's what we're going to explore. How can I have a comfortable relationship with you without a lot of tension? What do I need to do to help you be comfortable? And I can make some assessments based on how he acts to kind of modify my behavior a little bit. Not to manipulate, just to make him comfortable. So what we want to deal with in this class, and I want to be real clear about it, is only what we can see on the outside. We're not going to play getting inside somebody's head and trying to figure out what their values, beliefs, and emotions are. Okay? All of the behavioral scientists have come up with a lot of different ways of describing behavior. But when you get right down to it, they all kind of end up describing behavior in two different dimensions. First dimension is assertiveness. Assertiveness is simply when other people look at you, they perceive whether or not you're trying to control the situation or whether you're trying to not control the situation. Let me give you the opposite ends of assertiveness to see if I can make that clear. People who are perceived as not trying to run the world are we refer to as being ask assertive. They tend to ask a lot of questions. They tend to not really directly state what their opinion is. They are the good listeners. They want to hear what you have to say. Now, it doesn't mean they don't want to control the world. It just means when we look at them, it doesn't look to us like they're trying to control the world. Okay? The opposite end are those folks who, when we look at them, in fact, we do think they're trying to control the world. They are the ones who will tell you what they think. They have an opinion on everything. They tend to use very pointed gestures. They tend to be a little more active. Okay? What we've done to try and get at some of these characteristics is on the first page of the self-assessment inventory is list a variety of words that can be used to describe assertive behavior. And let me run through a couple of these for you. For instance, someone who appears to be competitive, fast, aggressive, who takes the initiative, even, particularly in social situations, is someone we would describe as being tell-assertive. The other end, the cooperative, more deliberate, maybe even a little slower paced, people who qualify what they say. They use perhaps, maybe, sometimes. They don't often say never, and they don't often say always. These people make broad generalizations. They say, well, I saw it once, and so therefore it always happens. People who are ask assertive will say, well, I saw it in one case, and here was what the situation is, and we might possibly want to consider concluding that, and then they'll give you their opinion. What we know is that if you take a general population of people, that about 50% of the people will fall on the ask assertive side of this, somewhere between, moderately ask assertive to very ask assertive, somewhere along this way. The other 50% will fall on the tell assertive side. Assertiveness deals with our perceived attempt to control the world or our perceived attempt not to. The other dimension of human behavior we call responsiveness. It can be called cooperativeness. It can be called a variety of different things. But in this instrument, we call it responsiveness. And what responsiveness is when I look at someone, do they appear to be very in control of themselves? Do they not show or telegraph a lot of emotion? Or are they someone that no matter what's going on, they're telling you how they feel, what they think, and they're emoting all over the place? Opposite ends of the scale. People here, up here, we call control responsive because when you look at them, they are very much in control of themselves. They don't give away a lot of information. Poker face, yeah. In fact, when I think of control responsive, I always think of Captain Furillo on Hill Street Blues. I mean, he never moves his face. No, he rarely ever says anything with his face. You have to listen to what he's saying. Yeah. Opposite end, the Liza Minnelli types, okay? I mean, they're just everywhere. And they're into this and telling you how they feel and what they think. There is no doubt with an emote responsive person how they feel, what they want, how they feel about you. They just don't hide those emotions. They don't try and control the expression of those emotions. About 50% of us will tend to fall on the emote responsive side. All right, so what does all this actually mean? Let me tell you something about these different groups. Analyticals. It's my easel. I can spell any way I want, right? Each one of these groups has some really absolutely wonderful strengths and a few weaknesses. A lot of people get to this point and are suddenly wondering, well, should I be an expressive? Should I be a driver? Should I be, what am I supposed to be? There is no way to be. There